After J.J. Redick, the Los Angeles Lakers coach, made this announcement about LeBron being pushed behind Luka.
The best thing for our team is him being the third highest used player.
LeBron didn't take it lightly. He fired back by threatening Luka publicly.
I'm gonna pick you apart.
In this video, I'll break down LeBron's reaction and what it means for the Lakers this season. The statement and the season. March 16, 2026, J.J. Redick, head coach of the Los Angeles Lakers, stood in front of reporters before a game. The team was at approximately 43 wins and 25 losses, third in the Western Conference, and had just come off a winning streak that included wins over Houston and Denver. A reporter asked about LeBron James and the offense. What followed took about 6 seconds to say and 2 days to stop reverberating.
He's still going to be, still has been a high usage player relative to.
He had more to say.
The best thing for our team is him being the third highest used player.
LeBron James, third highest used player on the Los Angeles Lakers. Those 5 words hit the timeline that afternoon and did not stop moving. The full quote, reported by the OC Register on March 16th, carried context. The clip did not. Redick acknowledged there had been stretches of the year where LeBron carried more because of injuries, and he made clear the challenge of finding rhythm had not fallen on LeBron alone.
Finding rhythm and groove within, the rotations and lineups when those 3 guys play.
But that was not all.
I think that's been the challenge for all of them, not just LeBron, all season.
To understand what Redick was describing, you need to know how this roster was assembled. On February 1st, 2025, the Lakers sent Anthony Davis, Max Christie, and a 2029 first-round pick to the Dallas Mavericks in exchange for Luka Doncic, one of the most disruptive in-season trades in NBA history. In August 2025, Luka signed a 3-year, $165 million extension with Los Angeles, making the arrangement permanent. A 26-year-old in his prime, locked in as the franchise engine. A 41-year-old LeBron James restructuring his function around him. LeBron's position on the arrangement was established long before any microphone confirmed it. When the trade was finalized, he messaged Luka directly. Luka, be your self. Don't fit in, fit out. No resistance, no territorial posturing. By January 2026, he made it explicit in a formal interview with ESPN. Luka don't need to bend his game for me. Luka is our 26-year-old franchise for this ball club. He don't need to bend his game. It's up to us to bend our game around him and figure it out. It's not a problem for me. The March 16 press conference did not announce a new structure. It put a name to one that already existed and that LeBron had already endorsed, publicly, twice, in the 13 games since the All-Star break. Luka was averaging 32.7 points per game. Austin Reeves was at 21.1. LeBron, in 10 of those games, was at 18.7. The numbers were already telling this story. Redick verbalized them. LeBron's usage rate for the season sat at approximately 27.6% overall, dropping into the 24 to 25% range when the full core shared the floor. Drives per 100 possessions were down, isolations were down, post touches were down. What had replaced those plays was a different function: screens on backdoor actions, transitional runs before defenses set, corner catches when Luka drew help, fewer possessions, more specific ones. His season numbers through approximately 48 games: 21.2 points, 5.7 rebounds, 6.9 assists, 50.6% from the field, 58.7% true shooting. Not a player in decline, a player who had chosen to spend his possessions differently. In the same press conference, Redick was careful about the narrative. He cited a recent win over Denver, where LeBron dove on a loose ball despite not feeling well, making the point that a player can be the third highest used option and still be among the most competitive people on the floor. Usage measures how many times the ball ends in your hands. It does not measure leadership, timing, or impact in critical moments. The NBA Central Post pulled over 623,000 views, 9,000 likes, and 192 replies in hours. The word demoted appeared in comment sections across platforms despite Redick not using it. 6 words moved faster than 6 sentences. YouTube creator Charles Bands on the Dreamers Pro Show had been making this case before the press conference confirmed it. He had called for Redick to reduce LeBron's role, had suggested benching him, and had argued the team could not not go anywhere until that shift happened. When the clip reached him, the defensive numbers backed the case. The Lakers were 14-7 in games LeBron missed this season and had gone 9-2 in games where Luka and Reeves played without him. Those records were already the backdrop of every conversation about this team. Redick did not introduce a new argument. He said the existing one into a microphone. On March 12th, 4 days before Redick's press conference, LeBron addressed the role shift after a win over Chicago. If it benefits others, it benefits the team. The team is most important. Everybody is successful if we win. So yeah, it is a sacrifice. I know what I'm capable of still doing as an individual, but what's important for this team, I'm able to adapt to, and that's the only thing that matters. Then, 2 days after the press conference, LeBron went and scored 30 points on 13 of 14, shooting against the Houston Rockets. The third option, who can still do that when the game calls for it. The demoted crowd had to reload. The reaction. What happened after the clip spread was not a basketball debate. It was a referendum, compressed, noisy, and operating on emotional logic that had been accumulating since before most of the people writing those comments were old enough to watch LeBron James play. The word demotion traveled through X, Facebook, Reddit, and YouTube with the velocity of a story that had been waiting for exactly this surface to detonate against. On X, the comment that captured the early temperature of the room pulled 778 likes in the first day. LeBron has accepted it, the Lakers coach has accepted it, can Bron fans finally accept it? Then came the GOAT debate incendiary that the internet never tires of deploying. No true GOAT has ever been a third option. That sentence, historically inaccurate but emotionally satisfying, circulated through replies and quote tweets and stitches until it had become its own piece of content, detached from the press conference that sparked it. GOAT in third option talks, the memes read. JJ Redick basically admitting he can't carry anymore. On Facebook, the conversation moved at a slower burn but split along identical fault lines. The defenders found space there, and some of the arguments landed with actual weight. Being third option is a compliment because his age statistically he's supposed to be benched. That argument, that a 41-year-old averaging 21 points on 50% shooting is producing at a level that most players cannot reach at 30, found genuine traction among the people watching games rather than timelines. Then, one scroll down, the mirror image, and LeBron being your third option is really just settling. Both threads generated thousands of replies, neither moved. On Reddit, the clearest-eyed read on the whole episode was the thread that simply said, "Who cares? Both sides already have their minds made up anyway." That is not resignation, it is accuracy. The GOAT debate has been frozen for years. No data point, no usage rate, no press conference, no 30-point outburst the next day was going to shift it. What Redick's statement did was give both camps a fresh surface to fight on. The basketball conversation happened somewhere underneath, mostly overlooked by the algorithm. YouTube amplified the most emotionally charged version of events. The Chris Bosh comparison surfaced independently across multiple channels without coordination, multiple commenters in multiple comment sections arriving at the same historical frame. Charles Bands surfaced it directly in his reaction video, reading a comment from his audience.
Having LeBron James playing the Chris Bosh role might get them to the Western Conference Finals.
The Bosh comparison cuts to the actual basketball argument. Bosh averaged 24 points per game as the primary scorer in Toronto, then walked into Miami and compressed his role entirely, deferring to LeBron and Dwyane Wade, spacing the floor, functioning as the third option on a roster built around two alphas. Those Heat teams reached 4 consecutive finals and won 2 of them. If LeBron is Bosh now, the efficient third wheel on a team with a true alpha in Luka and a second engine in Reeves, then this construction is not a demotion. It is a blueprint that has already been run and won. The people carrying that argument were looking at the winning streak, looking at the net ratings when the trio played together, and concluding that Redick's comment was the most rational thing he could have said. The people rejecting it were not looking at any of that. They were scoring a point in a debate that had nothing to do with March 2026. LeBron's own response, as noted, had already been given before the press conference. He used the word sacrifice, framed the reduced possessions as a deliberate trade-off for team success, and gave no visible signal of resentment. The 30-point game 2 days later was read by the analytical camp as early playoff Bron activation, the argument being that preserved regular season mileage is precisely how a 41-year-old shows up in May with functioning legs and a playoff gear still intact. The reaction from LeBron's inner circle was less composed. Rich Paul, LeBron's longtime agent, pushed back sharply on the Lakers are better without LeBron narrative, calling it nonsense and arguing the role shift was strategic, not a reflection reflection of diminished value. He was responding to a real number. The Lakers were 14-7 in games LeBron missed, a 667 winning percentage in the absences of a player whose presence is supposed to elevate the ceiling. Paul could call the framing unfair and have a point, but the record was real. Better Without Him crowd had a number to post. Among former players and analysts, the mainstream response was measured and largely supportive. Chandler Parsons, on Run It Back, gave it a full endorsement. Luka and Reeves run the show. LeBron functions as the efficient closer, and framing that as anything other than intelligent team construction at age 41 misses what is actually being built. Lou Williams backed the load management framework, stressing that not burning LeBron into the ground through the regular season is exactly how you access the version of him that matters in the postseason. No active superstar, not Steph Curry, not Kevin Durant, not Luka or Reeves themselves, weighed in publicly within the first 48 hours. The story lived entirely in the media ecosystem and fan discourse. Mainstream outlets framed it neutrally to positively as pragmatic coaching for a 23-year veteran on a contending roster. The winning streak, LeBron's efficient outburst against Houston, and the positive three-man net ratings and select lineup combinations collectively softened the narrative before the week was out. The weight of 2 decades. To understand why 6 words from a first-year coach landed with the concussive force that they did, you have to understand what those 6 words fell on top of. The third highest used player label did not arrive on a clean surface. It arrived on top of 23 years of accumulated narrative, some of it earned, some of it manufactured, all of it deeply entrenched. The Redick press conference did not create the controversy. It handed existing grievances a fresh vehicle to travel in. Start with the numbers, because the numbers are where the saner portion of the argument lives. LeBron's 2025-26 profile through approximately 48 games, 21.2 points per game, 5.7 rebounds, 6.9 assists, 50.6% from the field, 58.7% true shooting. For any rational benchmark, that is not a declining player. But the sharpest edge the critics found came from the volume decline. His scoring dropped by 6.8 points from the previous season, the largest single-season scoring drop among players who had been averaging 20 or more points per game. The volume that made LeBron impossible to plan against for 2 decades has compressed into something quieter, more selective, harder for the casual eye to find. For critics who have been waiting for a number to hang the washed argument on, this was the one. The washed cycle around LeBron is not new. It is mechanical at this point, almost clockwork in its repetition. Bleacher Report tracked 15 separate occasions over the past decade where critics declared his career effectively finished after injuries, after playoff exits, after roster transitions. He responds. The takes evaporate. The next rough stretch arrives, and it begins again. LeBron himself addressed the cycle before his 41st birthday. I'm in a battle with him, and I would like to say I'm kicking his ass on the back 9. That line, confident, self-aware, calibrated to provoke, was received exactly the way all his self-promotional quotes are received, approvingly by fans, dismissively by critics, shared millions of times by both. The cycle absorbs the response and continues. But this season's edition of the critique carried sharper edges than the standard washed commentary. An ESPN report surfaced details of Lakers owner Jeannie Buss harboring what were described as myriad of frustrations regarding LeBron's outsized influence over roster decisions through Clutch Sports, a perceived lack of accountability for the Russell Westbrook trade disaster, and insufficient gratitude toward the organization for drafting his son Bronny with the 55th pick in 2024. That was not a fan on a podcast. That was sourced organizational friction leaking into public reporting during a playoff push. Temperature inside the building, measured by a journalist. The Bronny dimension is its own self-sustaining controversy. Critics have used the word nepotism with frequency, arguing that a second-round pick on an NBA roster without a demonstrated path to meaningful minutes exists not because of merit, but because of whose last name precedes his. Chandler Parsons identified an inconsistency within the same conversation. LeBron reportedly did not want his son exposed to the Rising Stars format, while Bronny's presence on the main roster goes without equivalent scrutiny. The grievance is legible. It feeds into a portrait of a man who operates inside rules that bend for him, a portrait critics have been painting for a long time, with brushstrokes dating back to 2010. That year produced what is still the defining wound in LeBron's relationship with a portion of the fan base, The Decision, the hour-long ESPN special in which he announced his departure from Cleveland in prime time, framed around charity, experienced by the city he was leaving as a narcissistic spectacle. Dan Gilbert's open letter, written in Comic Sans and full of phrases Titles like cowardly betrayal, narcissistic, selfish, and heartless became the document that defined the backlash. The jerseys burning in the parking lot. The mercenary label that has followed every subsequent roster move, from Miami to Cleveland to Los Angeles to this. The argument, recycled perpetually, that Jordan never recruited his own super team, that Kobe competed within the structure he was given, that each ring LeBron has collected is cheaper for the company he assembled to win it. The 2011 NBA Finals remains the event critics return to most reliably when questioning his competitive character. Miami entered as favorites. Dallas won in 6. LeBron was passive in the decisive moments. 8 points in Game 4, a detachment from the game that was visible and unexplained. His post-series press conference gave critics the quote they still deploy, the reminder that his critics had to wake up and face the same lives they had the day before. That clip resurfaced 14 years later with fresh comment sections attached, because the internet has no statute of limitations, and the algorithm never forgets what generates engagement. In 2019 came the moment that damaged the activist-athlete image most severely. After Rockets GM Daryl Morey tweeted in support of Hong Kong protesters, LeBron, in China with the Lakers, said Morey wasn't educated on the situation at hand and warned of the financial, physical, emotional, and spiritual harm the tweet could cause. Hong Kong protesters burned his jerseys. American senators called it kowtowing to authoritarian interests. Conservative media found in it exactly the hypocrisy it had been looking for. A man who spoke loudly about social justice when it cost nothing, silent when it cost revenue. That episode has never fully left the discourse, and it does not require a new trigger to resurface. The media voices who have defined the most persistent critique are Charles Barkley and Skip Bayless, occupying opposite ends of the same argument and arriving at the same conclusion from different directions. Barkley calls him whiny for public teammate complaints. Bayless calls him a stat padder chasing all-time records in garbage time. Both have been making versions of these arguments for a decade. Neither will stop. Both have large audiences who came to be confirmed in what they already believe. The veterans who came before. LeBron James is not the first superstar to walk this particular road. The trajectory, legendary career, body entering its final functional years, younger star claiming the franchise, role reduced without being removed, ring still on the table, has been walked before by 3 players whose late career chapters offer 3 different versions of how this chapter ends. The closest historical match, the one analysts reach for first when talking about the 2025-26 Lakers, is Karl Malone. In July 2003, Malone walked away from 18 seasons with the Utah Jazz and signed a 1-year, $1.5 million veteran minimum deal with the Los Angeles Lakers, 2-time MVP, 25 points and 10 rebounds per game for most of a decade. He left guaranteed money on the floor because Shaquille O'Neal and Kobe Bryant were on the Lakers, and because a championship was worth more than any number a contract could contain. He was 39, turning 40. He averaged 13.2 points per game, the lowest of his career. He set screens. He guarded power forwards in the post. He ran the triangle's secondary options and sent entry passes to Shaq in the block. He openly called it Kobe and Shaq's team now. He made the sacrifice visible and accepted it without performance. The Lakers started 18-3. The structure appeared to be holding. Then on December 21st, 2003, Malone sprained his right knee against Phoenix and missed the next 39 games. The team made it to the finals anyway, but the knee failed again in Game 3 against Detroit, and Malone played the final games in a series of managed agony. The Pistons won in 5. Afterward, Shaquille O'Neal said plainly, "If Karl doesn't get hurt, I'd probably still be a Laker to this day." Malone made every sacrifice correctly and still did not get the ring. That is the cautionary tale lurking at the end of this road. The man who did everything right and lost the championship to a joint, not a decision. It is the version of this chapter LeBron is aware of, the one where health is the variable no amount of sacrifice controls. The second predecessor is Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Kareem joined the Lakers at 28, anchored the early Showtime era, won MVPs and titles. By his age 39 season, 1986-87, Magic Johnson had been orchestrating the offense for years. James Worthy had grown into a dominant secondary scorer. Kareem averaged 17.5 points per game, third on his own team. At 40, he was down to 14.6 per game in 28.9 minutes. The skyhook remained a weapon no defense fully solved, but the volume was gone. What remained was spacing, rim protection, competitive standards radiating through a locker room that needed them, and playoff bursts when the moment called for them. The Lakers reached the finals in each of Kareem's final 3 seasons, 1987, 1988, 1989, winning 2 of them. He acknowledged the difficulty only once, in his final season at 41. "I'm being phased out this year. Sometimes it's tough on me," a sentence stripped of ego, honest about the cost, and devoid of grievance. That combination, honesty about difficulty, absence of resentment, sits in precise proximity to LeBron's "it is a sacrifice" comment from March 2026. 2 players, 4 decades apart, on the same franchise, navigating the same fundamental transition. If the Lakers make a deep playoff run in 2026, LeBron would join Kareem in the narrow category of players who won multiple championships while functioning as supporting cast on their own franchise. The entry fee for that category is the willingness to hand over the primary possessions and trust the player who receives them. The third predecessor is Tim Duncan. In the summer of 2015, Duncan signed a 2-year, $10.8 million deal with the San Antonio Spurs, a fraction of his market value, specifically to free salary space to sign LaMarcus Aldridge and extend Kawhi Leonard. He had been the undisputed first option on 5 championship rosters. He was now the third, behind Kawhi and Aldridge, on a Spurs team that went 67-15 in 2015-16, the best record in the NBA that season. His numbers: 8.6 points, 6.8 rebounds, 1.3 blocks in 25.2 minutes per game. Numbers that would read as collapse if attached to anyone without 5 rings. Popovich, at Duncan's retirement press conference, identified his willingness to be coached critically and accept a diminished role as among his greatest traits, his willingness to allow me and my staff to coach him critically, the ability to be corrected, to compress ego into the shape the roster required. That was not weakness for Duncan. It was the whole point. Teammates noted he found the reduced role difficult, but that the team's success made the difficulty tolerable. He retired in July 2016 with 5 rings and no lingering grievances. An exit as clean as his footwork. The Mind the Game podcast that LeBron recorded with Redick before either of them had any professional reason to collaborate contained a passage that fits here. They were talking about what separates great players, the qualities that go beyond talent. LeBron's first answer: he has studied these men. He knows Malone's knee. He knows Kareem's transition. He knows what Duncan said at his retirement. The road ahead of him has been walked, and the version of it that ends with a ring requires the same thing it required from all 3 of them. Not just the sacrifice, but the willingness to make it without condition and without complaint. JJ Redick and the long trail he carries. There is an irony sitting at the center of this entire story that has mostly escaped the headlines. The man who triggered a 48-hour media cycle with 6 words about LeBron's role is himself one of the most contested figures in and around the NBA right now. Not primarily because of what he said on March 16th, but because of everything he said and did before LeBron was ever his professional responsibility. JJ Redick was hired as head coach of the Los Angeles Lakers in June 2024, a player turned podcaster turned television analyst with no prior coaching experience at any level, stepping into one of the most watched coaching chairs in professional basketball. The debate about whether the podcast to sideline pipeline produces real coaches began the day the hire was announced and has not stopped. His relationship with LeBron predated the job. They built the Mind the Game podcast together before either had any professional incentive to collaborate. That podcast, with its wine bottles and play diagrams and 2 men genuinely obsessed with basketball, was the foundation of trust that preceded the coaching relationship. It is also, in a different light, the origin of the tension between Redick's analytical clarity and the demands of managing an NBA locker room. His first season ended in a Timberwolves sweep in the playoffs. His response was to say the team needed to get into championship shape. Robert Horry, 7 rings across 2 franchises, had one question in return. First of all, what does JJ know about championship shape? Has he ever won a championship? That question hung over the offseason. Christmas Day 2025 produced his most replayed coaching moment. After a blowout loss to Houston, the Lakers' 3rd straight defeat in a holiday period slump, Redick stood at the podium and said, "We don't care enough right now." And that's the part that bothers you a lot. We don't care enough to do the things that are necessary. We don't care enough to be a professional. He referenced unnamed players who did not know what a flood was defensively mid-game. He announced that the next practice would be uncomfortable. The comments went viral, and the hypocrisy machine activated immediately. In 2024, Redick had appeared on First Take and declared of Doc Rivers, with full conviction, "It's always an excuse. It's always throwing your team under the bus. There's never accountability with that guy." Kendrick Perkins appeared on First Take in the aftermath of the Christmas rant to identify what he described as a pattern of behavior, public player callouts, accountability language aimed at anonymous roster members, and pointed to the specific irony: the man who condemned Rivers for doing exactly this was now doing exactly this. Redick later acknowledged he had not been at his coaching best during the December stretch, shifting some accountability inward. The footage of the 2024 rant remained available to anyone with a browser. A press conference walkout in the 2025 playoffs after a reporter questioned his rotation decisions in a critical game was called childish by ESPN's Brian Windhorst. A March 2026 sideline confrontation with Luka Doncic during a game against the Warriors, in which Redick reportedly grabbed Luka's arm and told him down, generated a brief rift narrative before Redick downplayed it as normal competition. Kenyon Martin used the clip to question whether the players in that locker room fully respect his authority. His media career left a separate and equally polarizing trail. He called Bob Cousie's era the era of plumbers and firemen, dismissing Cousie's historical standing by pointing to competition level. Cousie's response was concise: "People with less talent will always try to make a name for themselves by criticizing other people." He argued with statistical backing that Larry Bird is not a top 5 three-point shooter in NBA history. He argued that Michael Jordan's 6 championships came in a watered-down era, pointing to 6 expansion teams added during Jordan's peak. Gilbert Arenas and others read that argument as a transparent attempt to elevate the LeBron era at Jordan's expense. His live confrontation with Kendrick Perkins on First Take in 2023 over whether racial bias shaped MVP voting became one of the most heated segments that era of the show produced. The deepest running controversies in Redick's past involve allegations from his playing days. In 2018, a promotional NBA video for Chinese fans appeared to contain Redick using a racial slur. The clip generated over 16 million views on Weibo and sparked significant outrage in China. Redick said he had been tongue-tied and that the word was not in his vocabulary. When his Lakers hiring was announced in 2024, a separate allegation surfaced. A Duke alumna named Halima Nash claimed Redick had used the N-word to her face during their time at the university. Redick denied it categorically. Both allegations and both denials were compressed into the same news cycle, left suspended there without resolution, available to resurface whenever the algorithm finds them useful. What emerges from all of this is not a simple portrait of incompetence. Redick is analytically sharp and steeped in the game at a level most former players who transition to broadcasting do not achieve. The Mind the Game podcast, built before he had any reason beyond shared obsession to make it, demonstrated a man who thinks about basketball the way coaches do. The relationship with LeBron that predated the job gave this arrangement a foundation most coach-player dynamics do not have access to. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed watching this video, click on one of the boxes playing on your screen to watch more similar content.